Welcome to our initial webinar with Sehome High School. The Herring Center for Inclusive Education at the University of Washington is thrilled to be partnering with OSPI and some exemplary schools, one of which is here to share their journey with you today. Joining us today are inclusion specialists from the Herring Center for Inclusive Education. My name is Christina Novak, and I'll be walking us through the webinar today. Dr. Cassie Marston is also joining us today, and our program coordinator, Molly Lyman, is here in case you experience any technological issues. All right, before we dive in, let's make sure we're set up for the webinar. As we get started, please test your audio in the bottom left-hand corner of the menu. Thank you for sharing comments and ideas in the chat. Please use the Q&A feature for any questions you have so they don't get lost in the chat as we share ideas, resources, and other information. We will continue to monitor the chat for questions. However, we might move them over to the Q&A so everyone can see what's being asked. We'll be recording today's webinar and it will be provided on the Herring Center demonstration site's webpage. The recording from today will be available by the end of the week. So as we go through the webinar, please keep this webinar etiquette in mind. We encourage a growth mindset where you're open to thinking about new ideas, willing to push yourself to grow. Thank you for joining us today, for being present, positive, and engaged. So let's practice in the chat. Please share in the chat what impact you hope today's webinar will have on your school's inclusionary practices. We will be able to reference this information later, and it will be useful for us in future planning. All right, so we have a response on next steps for building, further awareness about the impact of inclusionary practices, help in knowing how to set up new co-taught in English classes. Awesome. Ideas around master schedule. One school's in the beginning stages of increasing inclusionary practices. Look forward to hearing more about inclusion in the high school setting. Another master schedule, tips for secondary inclusionary practices, co-taught classes. These are great, guys. Keep them coming. So to start, here's a little background information about the Demonstration Sites project. In the fall of 2019, OSPI launched the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project. The Herring Center partnered with OSPI to coordinate and lead this part of a larger statewide project, creating model demonstration sites that highlight inclusionary practices across Washington state. The Demonstration Sites project was developed to provide educators from around the state with the opportunity to observe inclusionary practices in action, meet with school teams, collect artifacts that aid in systems change, and learn about how to implement inclusionary practices in different school contexts. Our demonstration sites highlight the diversity of our state. They include urban schools, rural schools, and schools in some of our largest and smallest districts across Washington. In collaboration with Herring Center Inclusion Specialists, the original intention and future intention of this project is for demonstration sites to host visiting schools to showcase high leverage inclusionary practices. By sharing these practices and opening their doors to teachers, administrators, families, and community members, it allows visitors to see best practices in action and apply them in their schools. At the same time, the demonstration sites themselves continue to grow their inclusive cultures and refine their practices that contribute to equitable learning for all students. Clearly right now we have some constraints around literally opening our doors, but we have been doing our best to pivot to continue to provide transformational learning using virtual platforms. And this is how you'll hear today about Sehome High School's inclusive education journey. There are some founding principles that drive our model demonstration sites work. In education, we tend to focus on the problems associated with the practices instead of examining what's working well, why it's working well, and how we can use that information to make things better. Taking an asset-based approach is a productive way for schools to leverage their strengths to become more inclusive. Also, inclusion is not a special education initiative, but a cultural shift in philosophy and practice. If we simply change the way we deliver special education services without considering the culture of the school or how all students engage in teaching and learning, we will never make the changes we need to truly impact student learning. Through the course of our webinars and by way of scheduling virtual visits, districts, schools, and communities can learn more about what steps are taken to make these shifts towards becoming a more inclusive school. What is exciting about the demonstration sites is that they're in various stages of their journeys, and whether they're in year 1 of their journey or year 6, they all have plans for continuous improvement. They recognize that as new students enter their buildings or join in virtually, and as they collect more information about the best ways students learn, that their professional practices need to reflect that learning is responsive and meaningful. We developed this project because we experienced the impact on visiting schools when seeing inclusionary practices in action. The feelings, the dynamics, it was such an effective way for visiting schools to get why this works so well. And we experienced the impact on our demonstration sites by hosting visiting schools. But for today, in just a minute, we are very happy to hand it over to the team that is from one of our final and third cohort of demonstration sites, Sehome High School in Bellingham, Washington. But before we hand things over, we'll start with some polling to see who is here today. So far, I see we have a lot of teachers joining us, administration, district level administration, specialists, counselors, parents. Love seeing parents in attendance. Awesome. Thank you all for being here. And it is my pleasure to hand it over to Sehome High School's principal. Sonia, please take it away.
All right. Thank you. A huge thank you to the University of Washington, the Herring Center, for welcoming us and for all of your work to support inclusionary practices in the state of Washington. It's so fun to see many of you here today. Thanks for joining us. So we're about to embark on quite an adventure. My name is Sonia Cole. I'm the principal of Sehome High School. This is my 7th year at Sehome, hard to believe. 4 years as a teacher. I worked 1 year as an assistant principal, and this is my 2nd year as the principal. Today you get to hear from a part of our team that's working on improving outcomes for all of our students by using inclusionary practices. We're excited to share our journey with you. We sure wish we could host you in our building, but we're glad that you can be here with us today. All right, here's a picture of Sehome High School. It is located, as Christina mentioned, in Bellingham, Washington. We are part of the Bellingham Public Schools. There are 3 comprehensive high schools and 1 alternative high school here in Bellingham. Sehome currently has approximately 1,200 students enrolled. We just opened for hybrid instruction on March 8th, after being closed since March 13th of 2020. On this slide, you see a picture of our old school there on the left, and this is where our inclusive journey began. On the right is a picture of the new building that opened in January of 2019. Each of these buildings and spaces have played a key role in our journey to becoming a more inclusive community. Sehome is home for a range of individuals with a wide range of abilities. 12% of the students enrolled at Sehome qualify for special education services. Approximately 22% of our students who attend Sehome qualify for free or reduced lunch. Bellingham Public Schools, working in partnership with our community, engaged in the development of the Bellingham Promise, which is our strategic plan. A first draft was generated back in January of 2012. We continued to improve the Bellingham Promise collaboratively so that our vision, our mission, the values and the outcomes in our work priorities are always owned by staff, students, families, and our greater Bellingham community. Because of the continued input from our staff, students, and community, we recently revised the Bellingham Promise to explicitly call out our focused work on equity, diversity, and inclusion. A few of our core beliefs focus that all children should be loved. This always chokes me up. See, these guys are all used to me getting choked up all the time. And I was told recently that getting choked up is actually a superpower. So get ready, bear with me. All right. So we firmly believe that all children should be loved. Here we go. And that the whole child is important and every child can learn at high levels. All right. Our goal at Sehome High School is to bring those core beliefs to life. Oh my goodness. By envisioning and striving for a more diverse and inclusive and equitable school. Our inclusionary practices seek to dismantle segregation by intelligence. All right. Here we go. It has been vital that we have the right people on our team. We ask questions, push forward, and we continue to see that we have work to do. Here we go. We still have a long way to go, and you'll get to see part of the journey and then also as we continue to move forward. We have done segregation by intelligence for far too long, and dismantling that starts now. And it starts with the small steps that have a big impact. And the people you see today are a huge part of that. Oh man, I still have to keep going. Okay, here we go. Today, our presentation, we're going to share our journey. So to becoming a more inclusive school community. This is work in progress. Each and every day, we work to move the needle. We highlight for you today 2 key strategies that have made this possible for us. The first one is through our master schedule. The second is through our efforts with co-teaching, which you'll see includes for us co-planning, co-instructing, and also co-assessing. We will also share the barriers and the next steps that we are taking, and we will end with a few of our key takeaways that we have learned for each step in our journey.
Hi, my name is Kevin Candela, and I'm a teacher in the Exceptional Education Department. This is my 22nd year teaching and my 3rd year at Sehome High School. And first, I would like to acknowledge that our presentation team is a subset of our larger inclusion team. There are a number of teachers, paraeducators, and others that contribute greatly, but are not here presenting today. Their contributions should not go unrecognized, but allow me to introduce our presentation team. This is an inspiring group of educators with a very wide range of experience, from first-year teacher to those who measure our experience in decades. So you'll hear more about our individual journeys throughout our presentation, but I'd like to just quickly read everyone's name just to clarify pronunciation. So we have Kim Brunel, Kevin Candela, that's me, Monique Carpenter, Sonia Cole, Angie Dessler, Erin Furta, Casey Keck, Gwen Nyman, Julie Ross, Steve Terreri, and Liesl Weil. So that's who we are, but this really isn't about us. It's about our students. It's about their legal and civil rights, but also what is socially and morally right. So here's a brief video to introduce the student voice.
And I'm going to have to apologize, but I'm going to reshare with the volume because I realize you may not be able to hear this. So just one moment. All right, we should be ready.
Taught class is really helpful because it just means that more students can get the individual help and attention they need while the entire class is still being taught, so no one is really left behind. And I find that that's been really helpful for me. And even though some kids might be like, oh no, another teacher's watching me, it's helpful and it's going to make them better students.
I feel that two teachers in the classroom are very helpful because if one teacher is busy working, I will have another teacher come and help me individually. Also, teachers could be doing different things, and I feel like if one teacher is teaching me something I don't get it, I can ask the other teacher, and they could come over and explain it to me while the other teacher is doing stuff. And I really like it just because.
All right, I'm going to try this one more time.
You're doing great, Angie. You got it.
I love my PowerPoint. Here we go.
Two teachers, they both teach differently, and so they both have different teaching styles, and so do students. And so if students have different teaching styles and there's only one teacher, then not all students will understand the same learning style.
Hi, my name is Casey Keck, and I will be sharing throughout this presentation about my journey toward inclusive practices as a life skills teacher. This is my 13th year as an exceptional education teacher in my district's life skills program. As a brand new teacher, I started out within a district philosophy that leaned heavily toward a self-contained model. I spent my first several years having my students access instruction within my classroom only, with exception to an adaptive PE class. At that time, I worked really hard to create a classroom space that felt safe and predictable, and I grew to view my classroom as a safety net for my students. It felt like a place where they were sheltered from the many unexpected events lurking outside of our walls. At that time, 100% of my students were spending less than 10% of their day in general education settings.
Good morning. My name is Monique Carpenter. This is my 17th year as an exceptional education teacher. I'll be sharing what our resource program looked like in 2007. Sehome's resource program primarily includes students with mild to moderate disabilities. At that time, the majority of students with IEPs in reading, writing, and math received their specially designed instruction in self-contained skills classes rather than in general education classes alongside their peers. As for academic and elective classes, attempts were made to support more students in the general education environment. However, this move towards being more inclusive typically reflected a lead and support model only, where the special education teacher or paraeducator was present in the room to only support students with IEPs, often sitting or standing in the back of the room or pulling students to work in the hallway. The general consensus among staff saw students with IEPs as belonging to the special education teacher, and the general education teachers saw their role as teaching the students without IEPs, rather than sharing responsibility for all students. Hearing comments from general education teachers like, your students, those kids, or my kids from special education teachers was more common. It wasn't anybody's fault per se, it was just how things had been done for so long. Teachers lacked the training and support needed to build their capacity and their confidence in supporting a wide array of student learning needs, especially as more students with disabilities had not previously been placed in their classes in the past. Overall, students with IEPs were not thriving in their general education classes as they did not have the support needed to access their learning in order to experience success.
Around my third and fourth years of teaching, I started to hear my students and families say that they wanted more opportunities to take other classes. My immediate response was fear. I feared not having control. I feared for their safety. I feared the perception their peers might have. And I feared how I would be able to make sure their experience and the experiences of those around them was positive. I began by reaching out to a few teachers who I thought would be willing to have my students in class. I use the word willing because at that time it truly felt to me like I needed to ask permission for my students to take general education classes. I found that most teachers that I approached were willing, but also had some anxiety and questions around how to support my students. I was very aware of not adding extra work or stressors to my colleagues' plates. So I made sure that I sent students to classes with a paraeducator who knew the student and who could handle the accommodations and modifications with little support from the teacher. I also communicated with the teacher about what the expectations for each student were and where the learning impact might be found, often releasing teachers of the pressure to focus on the learning of the curriculum content and remind them of the other learning that can be fostered seemed to help ease their anxiety.
Good morning. My name is Erin Ferda, and I'm an exceptional education teacher. I've been teaching for 17 years. The last 11 I've been at Sehome. My first year at Sehome, I remember I was asked to teach a class that was comprised of 11th and 12th grade students who had an IEP who specifically had not passed our ELA state testing. So approximately 20 students were identified based on those test scores and placed in this class. And the goal was improve their reading abilities and test scores. And now 10 years later, I can still vividly remember the feeling in that room on that first day. The students were guarded, quiet, discouraged, and I did the best I could that year. I contacted a reading specialist at Western Washington University. I borrowed materials from my students. I worked hard to provide respectful and engaging learning opportunities for them. But despite my best efforts, students did not demonstrate much gain in reading. And as the year progressed, they opened up and shared their past school experiences, how they had felt disempowered, that they were told which classes to take without anyone asking their input, that they were often forced to repeat the same topics again and again, and that they often felt segregated and cut off from their peers. Students with the highest needs deserve the most qualified and experienced educators who have content expertise. They also deserve access to a diverse peer group and choice in class selection. This class provided none of these things and was discontinued the following year.
In 2012, our school introduced a daily 30-minute class for all students called Anchor Class. This provided a really good opportunity for a soft entry toward inclusive practices because it allowed most of my students to engage with their peers in a class that wasn't based on content curriculum and state standards. The purpose of this class was to provide all students support with homework, provide social opportunities, and provide a home-based teacher that could guide them throughout high school. Almost all of my students were able to attend an anchor class, some with support and some independently, and were able to begin fostering friendships with their peers. Anchor class also provided more teachers with the opportunity to have diverse learners in their class and grow in their confidence in being able to provide instruction to all students. I started to see changes in my students and the school community very quickly. Suddenly, I was observing my students showing more confidence as members of their school community. When we walked the halls, they were receiving greetings from peers, saying hello to teachers, and participating in activities that they previously did not have the confidence to participate in. It was at that time that I realized that inclusion wasn't just impacting my students, but was in fact breaking barriers down for everyone. I saw their peers seeking them out and truly wanting to understand them, and I felt teachers becoming more comfortable in their role as educators for all students.
Hello, my name is Angie Dessler. I've been teaching mathematics for the past 16 years, the last 10 at Sehome. And as we looked back at our journey towards inclusion, we realized that a significant factor that contributed to our ability to change was a program that we called instructional rounds. So back in 2013-14, you remember the state rolled out TPEP, the Teacher and Principal Evaluation Project. And our district chose the 5D instructional framework developed at the University of Washington. But it was brand new to all of us, and we needed an authentic way to get our staff up to speed with the language and the dimensions of the framework. So around this same time, Shuxton Middle School was working on a teacher-led program called Instructional Rounds, and we had ties to the staff there. So we reached out to them for some guidance and ultimately started our own program at Sehome. So this program involved teachers opening their doors to observations. So participation in the program as either a facilitator, observer, or classroom host was completely voluntary, and it was open to teachers only. And at that time, our principal had a lot of faith in us and agreed to give us some paid release time to make it happen. And I remember clearly that first staff meeting where we passed around a clipboard and we just hoped that people would want to join us. And fortunately, people did. The observations were not evaluative in any way. It was just a chance for collaborative, job-embedded experience working with that 5D instructional framework. Our goals of the program were to give teachers a chance to observe and just share best instructional practices building-wide. We wanted to create a culture of professional learning for teachers through reflective dialogue, and ultimately, our end goal in all of this was to increase student achievement, engagement, and sense of belonging. As teachers, as teachers opened their doors to one another, and as we spent time observing each other's classroom, the most amazing cultural shift began to happen at Sehome. New relationships were formed across content areas, and our doors stayed open. Enthusiasm for the program spread, and over the next 3 years, over 70% of our staff volunteered to participate in instructional rounds in some way. At the time, I was a teacher of pre-calculus on the upper level of our old campus, and I had no idea what was occurring in other classrooms, especially in the life skills classroom that was located way down in the basement. So as a facilitator of rounds, I was so inspired by what I observed and learned from my colleagues, but at the same time, it also made me realize how much more we had to do. Many of our systems back in 2014 and our programs, they were tracking. They were segregating various groups of students by perceived ability. And I and a lot of my colleagues, we started to wonder and talk about how we could do things differently so that all our students could learn alongside one another. So as we look at our journey and we look back, we just recognize how the instructional rounds program played a really vital role in building trust among our staff. It shifted our school culture towards collaboration, and ultimately it really set the stage for this inclusion work to come.
And Angie, I think another big piece was that we got to experience walking in students' shoes a little bit, because we would go through 4 different classes, 15-minute chunks in an hour, and we would go from pre-cal to science to PE to English, and just kind of the weight of how that felt and all the different norms and the inconsistencies kind of brought that to light for us as a staff too.
Exactly.
Prior to coming to Sehome, I had been teaching at a fully inclusive middle school in Madison, Wisconsin for 11 years. I was in my ideal teaching situation. Team teaching with 2 outstanding educators, collaborating, role blending, lead teaching math, and seeing all students thrive, including our newcomer students from different countries who spoke little to no English. Our students were making gains. We could see their growth academically, socially, emotionally, and behaviorally. Plus, they were all of ours. There was nowhere else for them to go or to be sent. No pull-out or self-contained classrooms, just our classroom and 3 incredibly dedicated teachers working to ensure every student received the support needed to become the best version of themselves and to reach their goals. 6 years ago, I moved to Washington State and was hired as a resource teacher at Sehome High School. Resource teacher? I wasn't even sure what that meant. I took the job, not really knowing what lay ahead of me. I'm not going to lie, my new teaching situation was definitely a big change, and I had a lot to learn. I learned that our high school had 2 different programs for students with disabilities, a life skills program and a resource program. I realized that as a resource teacher, this meant that I would no longer have students with developmental disabilities on my caseload as I had in Madison, as students with developmental disabilities were only in the life skills program. I was confused. I didn't understand why students were separated, including physically separated, as Sehome had the only life skills program at the high school level. So other students were bused to Sehome rather than attending their home school. It turned out that our life skills program, with its amazing teachers, paraeducators, and students, were in the lower basement level of Sehome, facing the back of the building. They were literally about as far away from the rest of school as you could get. They didn't even use the same entrance or bus loop that the peers did. This didn't feel right to me. I saw a few students from the life skills program included in academic classes. Again, I just didn't understand. Why couldn't they be with their peers? However, when I did see students lighting up when they saw students from life skills programs walk by in the hallway, I saw high fives, hugs, and smiles. I wanted to see more of that. In my interview, I shared that my strength, experience, and passion were all in inclusive teaching, and that is what I preferred to do. The incoming principal, also new to Sehome, said that I would be doing a mix of resource and co-taught classes. I had never taught a resource class by myself. I was terrified. I ended up teaching a self-contained English skills class and 2 sections of English strategies. I was making up curriculum on the fly for the English skills classes because there was none. Oh, sorry. Lost my spot. There we go. I didn't have a degree in English. The English strategies classes were support classes for students with IEPs who were in co-taught English 9 and English 10 with me and Steve. This was an additional class period to support them in working on the content we were learning in English. The class was supposed to ensure that students would keep up with reading grade level texts, completing work, and writing essays. That's not how it went. I was juggling 10 to 12 students with challenges in reading, writing, executive functioning, and behavior all at the same time. Might sound familiar. Trying to support writing 12 different essays with 12 different needs, good one. It felt like an impossible task. And even worse, it didn't seem to be helping the students at all. In the classroom with me and Steve is where the students were finding success, not in these self-contained classes. The intent and theory behind the self-contained classes made sense, but it didn't play out that way in reality. Some students shared that they felt stigmatized by having to go to a class just for students with disabilities. Some students would refer to their skills classes as classes for dumb kids. They all needed help. Every class, I left feeling that I didn't get to everyone. I felt like I was failing. I felt like I was setting up students for failure. My heart hurt. This wasn't working for any of us. On top of all that, I was struck by the glaring difference in language and in school culture around people with disabilities. My teaching program and previous teaching placement were completely centered around inclusive practices, including the use of person-first language, where the person is first identified and then additional information about them is provided. For example, instead of saying, that autistic boy will be in your class, person-first language will put the student first. John, who has autism, will be in your class. At my last school, which was the only school I knew after graduating from college, the staff made a strong commitment to the use of person-first language, as well as teaching students about the importance of using person-first language, as all of our students with disabilities were fully included in the general education environment. When I arrived at Sehome, I noticed that the use of person-first language was not the norm. A student's disability always seemed to go first, if a name was even given. I have 10 IEPs in my class, teacher once heatedly said. I calmly corrected the staff member, stating that they had 10 students with IEPs, not 10 legal documents sitting in chairs. This person did not seem to recognize or appreciate the subtle difference in language. I heard terms like SLD kid, IEP kid, SPED kid, autistic kid, those kids, your kids. To me, this language hit my ears wrong. It sounded stigmatizing and even dismissive of students with disabilities. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to judge, but rather sharing how different the language and culture around disability was for me upon arriving at Sehome. I do not think that people were trying to be hurtful or disrespectful. I had seen and experienced the impact that the use of person-first language had on the mindsets, attitudes, and beliefs of students and staff regarding students with disabilities, including students themselves who had disabilities. I strongly believe that how we talk about people matters. It matters a lot. Terms that have been used for many years were now being used in ways in which they were not originally intended. I heard some students use the R word to make fun of their friends or peers, while students with disabilities sat next to them in the classroom or overheard this in the hallway. This upset me. It was sad to see intelligent and thoughtful students using this language. Our students didn't seem to recognize the powerful and hurtful effects of their words. It was only as we had honest conversations with students about this term that we started to see change. Our students' disabilities are a part of their identity, surely, but not the only part, and not a part of themselves that they should ever be made to feel less than for. A change in school culture and a change in the language with which we all talked about students with disabilities was desperately needed. Language has power. It has the power to build people up or the power to tear people down. A shift to person-first language would have long-lasting positive results for our entire school community. As we encouraged the use of person-first language, many staff members made a concerted and almost immediate effort to make these changes when speaking about all students. I felt so incredibly out of my element. My passion for and belief in inclusion could not be stifled. Something had to give, but luckily there were groups of like-minded people who were also ready for a change. Game on. Bear with me, I'm still going. All right. So as I previously stated, inclusion was all that I knew prior to coming to Sehome, and I was worried about whether or not this job was the right fit for me. Luckily, the stars aligned. I was not the only new special education resource teacher that was hired in 2014. Sonia Cole, now our fearless leader and principal, was also hired the same year. And we got to share a classroom together. A103, we connected daily about our triumphs and tribulations. We discussed what we thought was working and what was clearly not working. Sharing our experiences, problem solving together, and laughing a lot definitely buoyed me through some turbulent times as I acclimated to my new role at Sehome. I'd like to think we were sounding boards for one another, voicing ideas and dreaming of a more inclusive vision for students and what it could be. Both of us wanted to see meaningful change take place. We started having conversations with our administrators and discussing ways that we could push on our current practices, particularly about school service delivery model for students with disabilities. We both believe that focusing on co-teaching was one highly effective and impactful practice that we could adopt as a school to better support students with IEPs. No more your students versus my students. Instead, they would be our students. In our opinion, true co-teaching meant that teachers would share roles and share ownership of all the students in their classes, including the planning, instructing, and assessing. In order to make progress towards our inclusive vision, we felt that special education teachers needed to have an equal role in the classroom, no longer being viewed as helper teacher, but rather a co-teacher in the classroom, working together towards the common goal of ensuring educational access for all students. In our inclusive vision, both teachers would be valued for the content expertise they brought to the table, and co-teaching would allow teachers to capitalize on their strengths. Fortunately, we had administrators who were not only supportive of our ideas, but were instrumental in helping to make these changes happen for the greater good of our entire school community. People who know us know that Sonia and I are strong and vocal advocates. We did not shy away from speaking up about what we felt was needed change. We firmly believed that a more inclusive school would benefit everyone. We decided it was time to rock the boat.
And I'll pick up from there. Hi, I'm Steve Terreri. The Steve Monique name dropped a couple of slides ago. And this is my 36th year teaching kids English language arts in public high schools. It's also my 7th year teaching inclusive co-taught classes. For the 2021 school year, I've got 6 English classes, 4 of them co-taught with 3 different partners. I often describe myself as the easiest recruit our exceptional ed team brought to the co-teaching vision. I'm not sure I could tell you a single accurate thing about how or when I got on board, but I can assure you, I was thinking, this is something I want to do, even though I don't yet know what it's going to look like. I felt this way because I can trace the origins of my personal journey to co-teaching to a question I had been asking myself since the beginning of my career. Now, most kids found success in the way I was teaching. Some kids didn't. The question I kept asking myself was, for those kids who failed, was it because of the kids or what I was doing in the classroom? My epiphany was accepting that no matter how I answered the question, I couldn't change the kids I got, but I could certainly change what and how I was teaching and assessing. And that mindset became a routine part of how I approached my job. It also influenced how I approached our building in-service and PD. So like many high-achieving schools in the late aughts and early 20-teens, Sehome faced some alarming trends in graduation and failure rates. We invested years of professional development and building in-service, developing approaches that targeted the 1/3 of our kids who were failing at least one 9th grade class. This work exposed many tightly held beliefs and attitudes, such as if 1/3 of our 9th graders were failing one or more classes, then 2/3 of our kids were succeeding right out of the high school gate, right? So what we were doing is working for most. Plus, kids' families and attitudes about education have changed. And don't get me started on the impact of iPhones and social media. What I was hearing, I guess you could call it, was a variation on the my kids versus your kids mindset. And these beliefs and attitudes seemed counterproductive to what we wanted our work to achieve. And serious efforts to reflect on our content and practices face these headwinds. That's where I was back in the fall of 2014, ready for something different that mattered. Now, I had no idea just how furious and challenging the ride was going to get. But when I compare Sehome today, even in this pandemic, with how the school was from 2014, it's as different as Mercury is from Pluto. And you can imagine, for a teacher who counts his experience in decades, I've really done everything English, taught all grades and electives, advised the newspaper and our lit magazine, taught AP and honors, even coached the debate team. But being part of our inclusive program is far and away the work I'm most proud of. And for someone who knows that learning is innate to the human experience and that all kids can and deserve to learn, it's been the most rewarding.
I told you guys it was quite the team. So I have an opportunity to share a little bit about our master scheduling process. This is one of our inclusionary practices that we wanted to highlight. So one of the keys that we've found to be able to create an inclusive environment for students is to really leverage our greatest resource, which is our staff. We use our master scheduling process to intentionally plan and schedule our co-teachers with a shared planning period. We also reduce the number of pairings that each special education teacher has in order to ensure that they have a shared planning with each co-teacher and to not be spread so thin. We place these partnerships and co-planning periods on the master scheduling board first, and we plan around those. We also intentionally schedule our paraeducators into classes before ever running students through the schedule. You can see the co-teaching partnerships on the master schedule. Those are in pink. This is not our full master schedule. This is just a little part of it. Many of the co-teaching partnerships have a shared planning, and then our para-supported classes are in orange. So those are placed on the board first, and then we plan everything else around those. Another important piece is building the correct number of sections to keep your ratios of students who receive special services to those who do not as close to 1/3 as possible. Each year, as part of our master scheduling process, we take a look at the need and the effectiveness of our resource classes. We've had several strategies classes that created a second block of support for English, algebra, and geometry support. We have also had general learning strategies classes that all students who qualified for services were enrolled in. There were no general education students, as Monique talked about earlier. We have collapsed the class-specific support classes and provided more intentional supports within the classroom. For students who need additional time to complete their work, we have scheduled them into what we have a general education class called Academic Workshop. It's similar to a study hall with some intentional learning strategies at the beginning, with additional supports from a paraeducator when needed. If you are looking to really move your inclusionary work forward, it starts with intentional planning right now as you begin your master scheduling process for next school year. I firmly believe that your master schedule reflects who and what you value. These moves will pay off. Here's where I would recommend you start. Start by prioritizing common planning for all co-teaching partnerships. This is a low-risk, high-reward practice. Teachers have the time and the mental space to think intentionally about student needs and to plan their instruction. Co-planning is vital for effective co-teaching and co-assessing. Limiting the number of teachers your exceptional education teacher is paired with is also vital. Relationships are intense and take a lot of work to maintain. Adding additional partnerships is challenging for all involved. These relationships take time to form and therefore need to continue over time. Having partnerships start over time again and again wears people out. One of the things that we started this year is meeting with every department to hear how they want to approach supporting students who qualify for special services, both special education and ELL services. Everyone needs to own and to be involved in the planning for next school year. We were trying to really shift having people feel like something was being done to them to being an intentional part of the planning process from the beginning. As you can see, each year we learn and we refine, we get new staff and we make changes. But these are the areas of our master schedule that really reflect who we are about and intentionally plan around those.
So with the support from our administrator, including a focus on ensuring special education needs were prioritized when designing the master schedule, as Sonia noted, we were able to look at expanding our offerings of co-taught classes. To do this, we needed to consider reducing the number of self-contained special education classes in order to free up teacher FTE. As a special education department, we made sure that we had co-taught classes in math and English to ensure students' specially designed instruction, service minutes outlined in their IEPs, were provided via their co-taught classes. Our department agreed that we wanted to ensure that our incoming 9th grade students with IEPs had the most support possible as they were transitioning to high school for the first time, and there would be a lot of change for them. Therefore, we decided to continue co-teaching Algebra and English 9, including looking at additional sections of each. We also looked at school-wide data and noticed that many students were failing biology, which was a 9th grade course required for graduation. As a department, we suggested that we co-teach biology to allow students with disabilities access to this class. Previously, the district had not supported co-teaching biology, claiming it was not an area of service in students' IEPs. However, biology was and is a content-heavy class, requiring students to read, write, and do math. As a department, we thought that it could be a perfect class to co-teach. Our principals supported our decision to co-teach biology, especially considering the percentage of students with and without disabilities that were struggling in the class at the time. Support was clearly needed. After our first year of co-teaching biology, we had a 600% decrease in the number of students receiving Fs in that class. Co-teaching was working. At the time, we had co-taught algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, as well as co-taught English 9 and 10. However, we found that once students reached 11th and 12th grade, co-taught classes were not available for them. As we were splitting our department staffing between co-taught and skills classes, we did not have enough teacher staffing to co-teach more classes. We were stuck. Instead, we were relying on paraeducator support and/or even a consultation method, which was not an effective way to meet the needs of our students. Even though these students were older, they still required and deserved the support needed to experience success. As Sonia mentioned, by eliminating our strategies classes, we were able to free some teacher FTE up to be utilized in supporting needed co-taught classes for upper grade levels. This eventually resulted in the creation of new co-taught classes for 11th and 12th grade students, including co-taught sections of creative writing, science fiction and fantasy, and financial algebra. And the slide here shows some of our additional co-taught classes that we've added since then.
So as we've had this opportunity to reflect on our journey, it's been really neat to see how many different contributing factors really fed into this movement and our progress. And one of those is our grading practices. Monique mentioned that transition to high school. A lot of things change for kids in that transition. And in our district, middle school, they do standards-based grading. So as 9th graders, that's the students' first experience also with letter grades. So over the course of maybe 4 to 5 year period, we had small cohorts of teachers who volunteered to attend assessment training institutes in Seattle, California, and Colorado, where we were challenged to reconsider traditional systems for grading. And as a staff, we really grappled with questions like, what should a grade represent? Are our grades accurate? Do our grading practices encourage and motivate students, or do they discourage them? Should a grade be based on effort, achievement, or growth? And should students with learning disabilities be graded differently than students without learning disabilities? There was a shift as we increased the use of sound assessment practices, including assessment aligned with transparent objectives, reassessment, self-assessment, actionable feedback, and emphasis on demonstration of learning over task completion. As our co-teaching model has grown and evolved, standards-based grading and sound assessment practices are present in many of our co-taught classrooms, and they've made a significant difference in student achievement, or should I say students' opportunity to show what they know. One example of this impact can be seen in our co-taught biology classes. So these graphs show progress made over the last 2 years. On the left, you can see the percentage of Fs in both non-co-taught and co-taught biology classes. And on the right, you can see the percentage of As and Bs for non-co-taught and co-taught biology classes. So we absolutely care about students failing classes, but we also have our sights set higher than that. We want students excelling in our classes. So we want to look at both of these metrics. In 2018, you can see that even though we had 2 teachers working together, the outcomes for students in our co-taught classes weren't as successful as we hoped them to be. And you can see the following year was when we made that transition to standards-based grading. The impact of standards-based grading and sound assessment practices can't be understated. We had a total of 61 students in our 2 co-taught biology classes last year. So large classes, 26 of those students had an IEP, and only 1 student did not pass biology last year. Not only did failure rates drop, but the number of students who earned A's and B's, as you can see, significantly increased. When students know what they're expected to learn, when they have the opportunity to practice in grade-free zones with actionable feedback, we truly see what they're capable of.
With all the changes taking place, and our department and administration knew that building staff capacity was critical. For these changes to take root, we needed staff buy-in, and we needed to provide staff with the professional development, training, and supports needed to build their understanding and their skills around inclusive practices. Multiple team members within our special education department noted concerns regarding students with disabilities, including some staff who are consistently not providing accommodations, IEP feedback, or attending IEP meetings. We recognized that we needed to go back to basics. While we as special educators were well-versed in our special education law, history, and jargon, that did not mean that other staff, particularly general education teachers, were aware of why our department was pushing back on some current and likely long-standing practices that were having negative impacts on students with disabilities. At one of our back-to-school PD sessions, the special education department presented as a team regarding IDEA law, the purpose of evaluations and IEPs, who's responsible for providing accommodations? It's everyone. And the importance of general education teachers providing IEP feedback as well as attending IEP meetings. Also, we had to address some common misunderstandings about accommodations, including that myth that accommodations were unfair, which resulted in some teachers refusing to provide them for students. We needed staff to realize that accommodations leveled the playing field for our students with disabilities. They provided equal access, not an unfair advantage. In order to better support staff in providing accommodations, our department made it a goal to ensure staff had paper copies of all of the accommodation pages for all students with IEPs in their classes prior to school starting. This provided staff time to review the accommodations and student needs, including time to reach out to ask questions or to get more support. Again, we needed general education staff to know that providing accommodations was their responsibility, especially as we continue to have more and more students with IEPs accessing general education classes than in the past. As we continued to move forward with expanding the number of co-taught classes we offered, additional training was needed. Therefore, in 2016, we held our first paid co-teaching conference for Sehome teachers. The conference was 2 days in August. All co-teachers were invited to attend with the goal of providing a review of what co-teaching is and is not, effective co-teaching practices, and most importantly, paid time to collaborate as a co-teaching team. As we all know, time is fleeting. Providing co-teaching teams with dedicated planning time where they could participate in some get-to-know-you activities. Oh no, I lost my spot again. Sorry, as well as begin planning for the first week of school was needed in order to set up teams for success. Staff seemed to be extremely appreciative of the time, as well as the administration, both at our building level and the district level, and their support to ensure that staff were compensated for their time and their work. Word was getting out throughout the school district about the work we were doing at Sehome around co-teaching and inclusive practices. In 2017, Gwen and I presented to the high school level administrative team about our experience with co-teaching together. Sonia led a discussion highlighting data associated with our co-teaching efforts, including data showing that the significant decrease in the number of Fs since our decision to co-teach biology, as well as the number of students with IEPs who are passing the Smarter Balanced English Language Arts exam. They were passing with level 2s or higher. We were seeing positive results that showed co-teaching was working for students. We also included a video showing our students, which you saw a clip of earlier. Co-teaching was working for all students. The students' responses were overwhelmingly positive, and they identified the very same benefits that we did. After this presentation to district staff, we were asked to open up our co-teaching PD to other high schools in the district to help them build their capacity around co-teaching practices. We have offered and led co-teaching professional development every year since 2016.
So as our vision of inclusion and commitment to co-teaching evolved, we realized that the questions we used in hiring interviews no longer align with this vision or model. So we rewrote them. We added questions specifically targeted towards experience with co-teaching and collaboration and knowledge of inclusionary practices.
Hi, it's Kevin Candela here again, and I think you English teachers will appreciate the subtle irony of the fact that I'm one of the oldest and also one of the newest teachers on this team. But if you go back to the spring of 2018, after many years in another district, I applied for a job here at Sehome. It was apparent in the application and interview process that there was a real emphasis on this co-teaching model of inclusion. So when the former principal initially offered me an interview, I knew that I was selected in part because I had that 15 years of co-teaching experience in a biology class at my former district. So she originally offered me a part-time position, which I respectfully declined, but the principal said, well, let me work on it, and called back about a week later to offer a full-time position that she had pieced together. So I really believe that showed the dedication to this model. During the interview, I was asked how I felt about co-teaching Algebra 2, and I shared some concern I had about the stretch in terms of the content. Sonia Cole, our current principal, put me at ease in that interview by saying that they were interested in the strengths and expertise that I brought to that partnership more than my knowledge of the content itself. So I recognized that at Sehome, there was a commitment and also an opportunity to really grow this model of inclusion. And I knew that there was interest and motivation to push the boundaries of which classes could be co-taught and open up access to classes where maybe was previously limited.
And hi, my name is Kim Keenel, and I'll be sharing my experience with joining the Sehome team. I was invited to interview in the fall of 2020, and prior to being interviewed, I didn't realize that I was being considered for a co-teaching position. When I was reading over the interview questions to prepare, it became really clear to me that this position would be different than every other position I had previously applied for. I was asked about my attitudes about inclusion, my experiences with collaboration, and my desire for teaching in an equity model. I had previously found that in interviews, I would try to work around the questions that were being provided to me to answer in a way that would really show my desire to work in a collaborative environment. I wanted potential employers to know that collaboration was my emphasis. I didn't have to do this with my interview at Sehome. I felt like the emphasis of working with others, learning from others, and respecting others was foundational to the culture of the school. I felt a tremendous sense of excitement, actually, when answering about whether or not I would enjoy working in a room with another teacher, and also when describing previous experiences I'd had with the co-teaching model. I'm new to the teaching field, and so I was able to draw from my student teaching experiences and reflect on what I had learned and how I had grown through that mentoring. I was also inspired by the fact that Sehome has a functional model of inclusion up and running that meets students where they are and adapts to them. I had previous experience with modifying tasks for students and differentiating materials, but I had been working as a resource room teacher and working in isolation. I had taught a middle school resource room and found the dynamic to be really challenging and somewhat ineffective. I worked with students who were frustrated and felt defeated by the model. They expressed a desire to be learning grade level content. As I prepared for my interview with Sehome, I was able to reflect on my experiences and concluded that I was inspired by the opportunity to work in an inclusive model. I think that the use of the interview questions was really effective. It emphasized the importance of co-teaching and inclusion, and it gave me the opportunity as I prepared for the interview to know if this was an avenue I wanted to pursue, and I absolutely did. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to be part of this fantastic team.
Hi, my name is Lisa Weil, and I joined the Sehome's Exceptional Ed team spring of 2020. I've been teaching since 2012, and I have a few years in resource experience, but a majority of my career has been teaching in the ABD program. I'm going to share a few things that stood out to me when I transferred to Sehome. One big thing that stood out to me when joining Sehome was how the Exceptional Ed department and the administration emphasized the importance of spending time with our co-teachers before the school year began. You may remember Monique mentioning this training earlier in the webinar. During this time, we discussed co-teaching models, students' needs, curriculum, shared responsibilities, and engage in some planning. What was additionally nice about this training was the opportunity to really get to know your co-teacher as a person. We had the time to share about each other and develop a bond before the hectic year started off. Sonia mentioned earlier about how we're intentionally building in planning time with our co-teachers into our schedules. And this really stood out to me this year. It not only allows us to plan lessons together, but also has a time to evaluate and discuss student work. I quickly learned how valuable this time is for us as teachers and how it benefits all students. The last thing I would like to mention about Sehome is a great respect and trust that I've witnessed between our exceptional ed team and their co-teachers. I've learned that when asking for IEP feedback, questions about placement or student performance, to include both teachers in the conversation. The exceptional ed teachers and general education teachers refer to each other for input and recommendations, and I truly believe that our school culture and practice helps foster these relationships.
Another move that we made is to convert classified or paraeducator FTE to certificated teacher FTE. So last year we had 2 full-time paraeducators retire. And at that point, instead of hiring to fill those positions, we exchanged that FTE for an additional exceptional education teacher. So this allowed us to expand the number of co-taught classes we offer even more. We currently still do have 2 paraeducator positions remaining in our program, and they contribute key supports in science and social studies classes that are not co-taught but do have significant needs.
All right, as mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to move into a new building in January of 2019. But before moving into the building, part of the process we went through was really developing our core covenants with our students, families, staff, and community members. Through this process, we had 4 words that kind of developed as who we want to be as we move into our new space and continue to redefine who we are as Sehome Mariners. The core covenants are perseverance, inclusivity, integrity, and respect. These are mounted in our commons and in our classroom. More importantly, these are the traits that we look for in ourselves and others, and the qualities that we celebrate as a community. We continue to also reimagine and push the limits on what it means to embody each of these core covenants. In January of 2019, we moved from the old building into our gorgeous new building that we'll show you a little bit of in a minute. We not only changed the location, but we also rebranded who we want to be as a community. Here's a short video to highlight our space. You will see Michelle Casabula, who was the principal for planning this building and who was referenced throughout much of this presentation, who was instrumental in our inclusionary vision and steps as well.
Welcome to your brand spanking new school. I think the biggest thing I remember is just like walking to the new school and just seeing how, you know, great and big it is. It's just like wow, this is something that actually like became a reality. I've noticed one thing that has kind of like hit me is that we kind of have two hallways on top of each other, whereas in the old school, it's two hallways like on the other side. And so just talking to friends, they've kind of described to me how they've never seen so many people in the hallways before.
One of the design principles we had were large interior gatherings, breakout gathering spaces, and that really helps bring our school together. Yesterday, a student had said, and overhearing some conversations was, wow, I didn't realize this many students went to this high school. And it's because they don't ever see each other all at once, not even in the cafeteria. Now we've taken all of those buildings and merged into one building with this grand space that you see behind me where kids come in and they gather. And I think that sense of pride radiates in the community of Sehome.
So right off the commons there, you can see that yellow arrow. That is where our life skills program is now located. This new building was intentionally designed, putting our life skills programming right at the center and the heart of the building. As mentioned earlier, in the old building, it was in the basement, far away from everyone else. The new location is the heart of the building with direct access to the main office, commons, and counseling center. As we settled into this space, we also discovered that we still had additional work to do. Our students who rode special transportation were being picked up and dropped off in a parking lot at the side of the building away from their peers. And we advocated pretty hard with our transportation department to help them see the need to have all students picked up and dropped off in the same location. The bus loop is where students generally congregate, I guess in non-COVID times, and have conversations. It is vital that we provide this opportunity to all students, and this has been part of our continuing to use a lens of making sure that all students have access and that we continually look at our practices and refine them as we go.
And our branding did not stop there. With our move into a new building, it was time to let some things that were no longer serving us stay behind with the old Sehome, including our department name. We made the move to rename and rebrand our department. Instead of the special education department, we were now the exceptional education department. Our principal at the time fully supported this change, feeling like it would be another positive step towards the intentional use of more inclusive language throughout our school community. At the time, the term SPED had been used to quickly refer to our department or students with IEPs. Many people said it was just easier to use this term. Unfortunately, over time, this term was being used by others outside of our department in a harmful and negative way. This term took on a different meaning than its original intention. For our school, the term SPED was not being used to highlight a strengths-based vision of students with IEPs. Instead, staff were using this term to discuss and refer to students with disabilities, as in a SPED kid. At times, this was happening in front of other students. Our team felt that it broke confidentiality for students with IEPs. Additionally, it was not a huge leap to think that students could easily figure out what the term SPED meant and in turn identify students with disabilities. We fully recognize that this is terminology that is still used in many college and university education programs today. However, it was no longer the right fit for our department, for our school, and most importantly, for our students. In reality, the only thing that changed was our name. Again, words have power. By shifting our department name, we were able to shift mindsets. Sorry, I don't know what is going on with my screen. Okay, by shifting our department name to Exceptional Ed, we wanted to create a new vision and feel for how people viewed our department and the students with whom we worked. Multiple members of our department had their national board certification as exceptional education specialists. So we felt this was another strong reason to rebrand and rename our department to reflect the language recognized at some of the highest levels of teaching certification. We felt good with this decision, but we received a little bit of questioning from other schools and district level administration about this choice. Some people felt uncomfortable with it or didn't understand our rationale. We explained that the words special and exceptional are not by definition any different, but for us, the feeling associated with each term was different. People began to understand that we wanted to highlight our students with IEPs. Rebranding ourselves was yet another step in our inclusive journey.
So Julie, do you want to share out a little bit about this? Julie and I co-teach biology, and on the very first day, I wasn't sure how we were going to introduce ourselves to our students. So again, like how do we use words and labels in different contexts? And Julie, actually, do you want to just say how you did it?
Sure. And this was when Erin and I were still kind of getting to know each other too. So I wanted to introduce us both and recognizing that we each had really different strengths. So I said, my name is Ms. Ross, and I'm the content specialist for this course. And this is your teacher, Ms. Ferda, and she is making sure that the content is going to be accessible for everyone. So that was kind of highlighting. We knew that we didn't have the same strengths, but we also were going to be serving all the students with our specific strengths.
Yeah. And when we first started, so I'm in my third year now with biology, but that first year, I did not know biology. I did not have a science background, and we were not trying to pretend to be something that we weren't for the students. And so it was really important for us to be upfront about that with them. And for me to also like model that learning, like how to be a learner. And sometimes I would even like sit out in the desks with them, and even some of the vocabulary, I would just be like, what is that? Like, what are you talking about? And so that was really important to our process. And my role in that class, there's been an evolution, which is also part of why you need to have co-teachers, have multiple years together so that you can grow in all areas. But I just really appreciate the way we still introduce ourselves that way. If she's going to teach it, I'm going to make sure that we learn it.
All right, the vision for inclusive practices continue to evolve and change. We continue to learn more and push what we believe to be possible. We continue to make incremental shifts and changes in practice and mindset. You can see the shift from our students in our resource program accessing services in the special education setting to accessing general education content in the general education setting. We have increased our number of co-taught classes and increased access to rigorous grade level content and classes with peers. We continue to look for expanded opportunities for our students in our life skills program to access general education as well. The shift highlighted this far have been leveraging the master schedule to support co-planning and co-teaching. Make sure that your interview questions help you get the staff with your vision and mission of inclusionary practices. Providing professional development opportunities to support co-teaching partnerships and opportunities for learning and assessment and grading practices. We continue to build more and more momentum around our inclusionary practices each year.
So next, we're going to highlight three of our key inclusionary practices: co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing. And so we'll get to hear some from some of our gen ed teachers and some from our exceptional ed teachers.
All right, co-planning. Just a reminder, Steve Terreri and I've been teaching long enough to feel comfortable sharing this cartoon. Now, it's my favorite metaphor for what co-teaching is to me. It also reminds me why having the resources and energy to co-plan is fundamental to whether we pull off teaching all kids. Now, the ideal elements of co-planning are more extensive than you might think. but so are the benefits. Effective co-teaching begins with common planning time built into the master schedule. There's no substitute for this. Now, ideal elements include a dedicated space where you can put up a do not disturb co-planning happening sign. I'm not kidding about that. And if you co-teach daily, be ready to co-plan daily. Even if it's 5 minutes of, are we ready for the show? Then be ready for those benefits to come sliding down. Co-planning is where my partners and I learn how to be a team. It's where our beliefs, styles, and personalities both mesh and clash. It's where we make dozens of decisions, all in the best interest of kids, of all kids. And after a while, it's where we become more than just a gen ed and an exceptional ed teacher. To be more specific, co-planning is really the only place in this powerful model where professionals in a team can talk, listen, and learn.
Hi there, my name is Gwen Nyman, and this is my 27th year teaching somehow. I don't know why. I don't know how I got here. I came to Sehome the same year that Monique and Sonia came, so about 6 years ago, and I've been co-teaching English classes with Monique for the past 4 years. This has not been my first co-teaching experience, but it has been my best. So co-instructing or co-presenting in an English classroom is kind of like paddling a tandem kayak. There's a balance of movement, voice, student interaction, and presentation of material. My teaching partner, Monique, and I know each other very well. We've developed a relationship over the years that transcends speaking. We formed this relationship by getting to know each other. Simple things like our families, our favorites, our philosophies. She knows my coffee drink, I know hers. Over time, we've formed a very strong bond. I know her body language and visual cues, and she mine. Reading those, we can make in-the-moment changes to instruction. When people come into our classroom, they cannot tell who is the English teacher and who is the exceptional ed teacher. The answer is we both are. Regardless of what my diploma says, I am a teacher of student with exceptional needs, and Monique, she is a teacher of literature and composition. The students simply see two teachers of equal status who are there to support them by answering their questions, look at their work, or advocate for them. Those students, including students with IEPs, have no idea why they have two teachers, but they do know that no matter what, no matter who they are, they get more individualized attention to their learning in our classroom. So how do we ensure this kayak keeps moving smoothly? Well, we've chosen to run our classroom as a shared presentation. We know each other's roles. We use verbal cues and visual transitions to shift who is speaking. And we love to infuse humor and empathy into our daily lessons. As Steve previously said, co-planning is absolutely key. You cannot do any one part of inclusive teaching practices in isolation. We must plan together so I know what I'm responsible for presenting and how to volley to my partner when time. There is an importance of equivalent roles and airtime, but also an acknowledgement of strengths and weaknesses. It is not unusual for one of us to defer to the other. And the value for students, well, modeled healthy and respectful interaction between adults in a collegial setting, reiterated academic information, but from different perspectives and voices, and two adult advocates with a strong wealth of content and skill knowledge in the classroom. But ultimately, two people who love them and believe in them. Another key component to co-teaching is having a shared instructional space. Room 256, where we are now, we used to be A103, is not Mrs. Carpenter's classroom where I am a visitor, or vice versa. We share this space. There are two names on the door, there are two desks in the room, there are two personalities represented. So our first year teaching together, we had a student draw us a door sign, as you can see on this slide. We are equals in her drawing. We are distinctly different as well. She captured our physical attributes, Monique with her glasses and bun, me with my hair down, but also our favorite books and the papers to be graded, always the papers to be graded. So 4 years later, this sign still welcomes students into our classroom.
Thanks, Gwen. And just real quick, an artifact here we have on the right is an example of Gwen and I planning out. We literally plan step by step who's responsible for what. So you can see it's our shorthand, but the G and the M represent Gwen and Monique and who is going to do what in the instruction. You also see this represented in the picture on the left where we have an example of an agenda we put up. We color code it to help us remember who's responsible for what when we are instructing, while also letting students know what's coming during the class period.
Like, no.
And the other ones who owned up to it were executed.
Very good.
So the chickens had no choice. Their protest didn't change anything except that 9 of them died and they still had to give their eggs away. Give us a reaction if you're like, this is not what Old Major was wanting.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of shocked faces. And again, I think this ties back into our propaganda. What type of propaganda is Napoleon using with the animals in that scene?
Fear.
Fear propaganda. Yes, good. Shri, Ian, yes, fear propaganda. And they tried to hold out. And then as you're seeing people around you dying, give a thumbs up if you're like, I can see why they finally gave in, because more hens were going to die. And at some point, they realized they were fighting a losing battle against Napoleon. They weren't going to be able to sway him. They were going to die in the end. And more people were going to die because, or more animals were going to die because of it. All right.
Good. I could go off even further on that one, but I'll move on. Who can read question number 2 for us?
All right, hello again. So I'm Angie, and I just want to talk a little bit about co-assessment. So implementing sound grading practices have been my focus of professional growth over the past 15 years. This third element of co-teaching really involves the equitable sharing of both formative and summative assessment responsibilities by both teachers and for all students. Co-teaching is not a division of labor. Both teachers work together to support the assessment needs of all students. Grading with another teacher requires a shared philosophy around what equitable grading and assessment practices are. There's so many questions to wrestle with, like, what are we going to record in the grade book? When do we allow students to retake assessments? What are we going to do when an assessment shows that some students aren't proficient yet? How are we going to monitor student progress and share that information with families? And all of those decisions have to be made together with both co-teachers. Early in my teaching career, the general practice of assessment in math was teach it, test it, move on. Students played a point chasing game, and at the end of the term, it really wasn't clear what achievements and learning had actually been made. Every student was given the same daily assignments, the same quizzes, the same final tests, and we thought that that was what was fair. But in reality, the final grade spoke more to a student's level of compliance than actual achievement. And I even remember teaching teachers that would post paper copies of their grade books on the wall by student ID number, as if that would keep it anonymous, and even sort it by grade so that students could see where they were at in relation to their peers. And now we know better. We know that ranking and sorting and giving everyone the same thing when it isn't what they need is not equitable assessment. And the old ways weren't fair. And in reality, they excluded many students from experiencing success in math. So now we focus on meeting students where they're at and then working smarter to help students experience as much growth as possible. So on this slide, you can see an example of a tool that we're using with students in Algebra 1. I co-teach with Monique. We help students identify where they're at in their learning in order for them to focus on continued growth over time. So as the general education teacher, I bring content area expertise and my co-teacher brings her expertise in exceptional education. And then we work together to modify our assessment strategies to work for all kids. And oftentimes we find that a modification we've made with one student in mind or with a small group, we end up bringing it to the larger group or even the whole class because we find it benefits everyone. So talking about co-assessment separate from co-planning and instruction is nearly impossible since assessment is such an embedded part of everything that we do in math. Our planning stage starts with creating clear learning intentions and criteria for success. What are the learning goals for the lesson? How are we going to make those goals transparent to students? And then we work together to engineer effective classroom activities, discussion, learning tasks, things that are going to elicit evidence of learning. Veteran teachers, you know that oftentimes the most gains in student learning are made in the moment. Discovering a student misconception, asking the right question, get them thinking deeper or in a new direction is the powerful strategy. And both co-teachers must be willing and able to provide this kind of in-the-moment feedback to students. When we're back learning in person, one of our most high leverage strategies that we use are vertical whiteboards, which make student thinking visible. Then both teachers can observe thinking, provide small group feedback, and we can address common misconceptions with the whole class during our consolidation at the end. Another use of vertical whiteboards is for student-led tutorials, a strategy that we borrowed from the AVID program. And so I have a quick video here to give you a glimpse of those strategies in action.
Out of it, once you left two, cube and then take the 9, you can just square root it. If you like put it out, then
I think I understand like the base, like what these do in that other unit, but I just didn't understand like what the square root of x looked like. And then I got mixed up and I wasn't sure what the 9.
So again, the video just highlights the inclusivity that's created by our student-centered instructional strategies, the use of vertical whiteboards, student-led tutorials. They really activate all learners as instructional resources for one another and as owners of their learning.
Hi, my name is Julie Ross, and I've been a gen ed science teacher of biology, chemistry, and AP biology for 16 years. And I currently co-teach with Erin Furta for freshman biology, as she's mentioned before. And we assess all of our formative and summative assessments for the course together, as well as co-write them. And I just want to give a shout out to our administration, who also gave us time and space in the summer to co-write our objectives for the course based off of state standards. And we had a week to stick all the standards out on sticky notes so that we could plan out for the course, which allowed our planning for our co-assessment to be very clear and well planned out. The formative assessments are a way of seeing where the students are at with one objective for the content knowledge, so that Erin and I can decide what and how to present the content for the next day and the upcoming weeks. And the co-assessment it happens in our daily planning time. And you can see on this slide that there is an example of a formative assessment that we give to the students. And this sort of gets presented in 3 steps. The first step is a quiet time for the students to answer the questions on their own without any support from the teachers. Step 2 is a class discussion together where the students are allowed and encouraged to share their answers that they got on the formative assessment. And we really push for multiple answers on each question, because then the students can share with one another how they could represent their understanding in a variety of ways. So we get diagrams, we get written explanations, and the students come up on the board when we have in-person times, and they can show what they know. And finally, the third step is the students using that chart at the top of the formative assessment to show their self-assessment of their understanding of this objective after we've had our class discussion. And that's been really valuable because that is not put into our gradebook. So there is a low risk, high benefit for the students sharing how they really feel about their own understanding of the content. And then we keep that as data and we can compare it class to class and objective to objective and know when the students are ready for a summative assessment. And we actually had the joy of this being such a naturally established assessment process that at one point in the middle of the year, a student demanded to take over the formative assessment leading in the class. And he just ran through all of that and stood in the back and watched and got a little emotional. It was really cool. The students could run it themselves. The next slide is just sort of a summary of my journey as a co-teacher. And I'm just going to kind of summarize because I recognize that we're short on time. So I have had co-teaching experience with 3 different co-teachers over a variety of models. And before I was placed with co-teaching, I did plan with content alike teachers, with other gen ed teachers, and that was a really good experience. So I was ready for collaborative work, but I didn't know what co-teaching meant. And so as I was assigned my first co-teaching experience, I realized that it was a lot of work and we weren't getting a lot of benefit out of it because there was no co-planning. We were completely separate. Even when we were together in the classroom, I was in the front, they were in the back, and they only served the students who had IEPs. So everyone knew why the other person was there, as sort of recognized as an aide, only interacted with students with IEPs, and any talk that we had together was about students of concern. When I received my second co-teaching assignment, we had some built-in time for planning, mutual prep. We had some limited co-instruction, and most of that involved, like, again, trying to create some differentiation for students, especially around students of concern. But we were both serving all students in the classroom at that point. And any co-assessing that we did was looking at scores that had already happened from my sort of self-imposed punitive point system hoop jumping process and seeing how we could love the students through the hoops that I had created. And so finally, when I was looking at a true co-teaching model and I had volunteered and signed up and said, yes, I want to co-teach and I want to improve my practice, we had true co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing where everything was designed together. We were using our strengths. We were remodeling the grading system so that students could truly show what they know without these self-imposed hoops to jump through. And we really saw, as you could see in previous slide that Erin shared with the change in the grades, you could really see success for the students in biology class due to the changes in standard-based assessment and true co-planning, instructing, and assessing.
All right, so as we wrap up here, we want to just give you some of our takeaways, but recognize that for a lot of you, this might be your starting point. So co-teaching is, first off, it should not be forced on any teacher. It should be willing participants with consistency across time rather than switching teachers every semester, every year. It takes a long time to get to know each other, to get to know your teacher moves, to find compatibility. You really have to enjoy this person because you're going to spend a lot of time with them. So willing, consistent, compatible. Also, knowing that your co-teaching and co-planning are going to drive the master schedule. For any child of the 80s, this is a giant Tetris board, and the challenges are there, but you get to kind of solve the problem. And when you do, it's a beautiful thing. Also, this cannot be a one and done situation. There has to be ongoing professional development that results in professional learning and growth. Workshops, retreats, time, all need to be built into this program to build capacity, problem solve, and ultimately to collectively celebrate all the work that's being done. Co-teaching is some of the hardest work I've ever done, but I also can say 27 years into this profession, it is the best work I've ever done.
Tremendous thanks to Sehome High School for sharing your journey today. What a wonderful presentation. We're going to take you through some closing slides here in just a second. So normally we would have you all respond into the chat to these two questions we have for you. So if you have time, please reflect on, what are the systems, culture, and practices that you've heard about today? And if you'd be able to provide us with things you liked from the webinar today, that'd be wonderful if you could put in the chat. And then we want to direct your attention to the UW Demo Sites website. So if you want to learn more about Demonstration Sites Project and the OSPI's Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, please visit our website or feel free to email us at uwdemosites@uw.edu. Also visit our website where we'll be posting a recording of this webinar along with the folder and the resources for artifacts presented today. So we want to take a minute with you all to do a closing activity. So if you could all please log on to pollev.com/UW Hearing Center or text UW Hearing Center to 22333 to join. Once you've successfully logged in, please respond to the following prompt. In one word, what are the systems, culture, and/or leadership practices you heard about today that support inclusive schools? All right, we already have one response come in. Inspiring, collaboration, beautiful, vision. Thank you all for participating. This is a great word cloud that we can share with Sehome, and you guys can proudly display it somewhere. We have culture, team, hard work. And as you see, as more people start to indicate the same idea, you'll see the words start to get bigger. So we have a big emphasis now on culture and collaboration. Worth it is part of that. Yeah, this looks wonderful. Keep those responses coming, you guys. We'd love to see this cloud keep growing. Enthusiasm, exceptional, educator. Oh, it's looking great. Team. Wonderful. Okay, so Sehome High School will share that word cloud with you all. Keep responding and we'll get those responses out to you all. So we'd love to get feedback about our session today. This will give us information about what we can use to effectively share demo sites journeys in webinar format in the future. If you could please click on this link to fill out a brief survey through Google Forms. The survey is anonymous, and Molly will send clock hour forms to those of you who are in attendance after the webinar. So big thanks to OSPI and CSTEP for their partnership in this project. And another big thanks to Sehome High School for your inspiring work. Thanks to all of you for joining us today to learn more about inclusionary practices and for envisioning how you might take home some of what you learned today and apply it to your schools. We will hope you will join us for future webinars that when our doors open again, you will also take advantage to in-person school visits. Thank you all for joining us. And another big round of applause for Sehome.